All right, I think that's everyone from the waiting room. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the virtual question and answer session for the Adams Street branch call to artists. There we go. So I'm just rearranging my screen a little here. If I could just ask everyone to mute yourselves for the very short presentation I'm going to give you, that would be great. Hi, I've forgotten my name. I'm Sarah Rodriguez, Public Art Project Manager for the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. With me tonight is my colleague Christina Carroll, our Communications Director. The Director of Public Art for the City of Boston is Karen Goodfellow, and the Chief of the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture is Cara Elliott Ortega. Our project partners for this commission are the Boston Public Library, the City of Boston Public Facilities Department, the Office of Neighborhood Services, and NADAA, the architect for the new Adams Street branch building. I'm going to quickly review our meeting protocols, ways to make comments or ask questions today. We've left the chat open so that you can share your thoughts or ask questions via the chat. And that will go to everybody. You can let me know if you want to ask a question via the chat during the Q&A portion. Other than that, if you're new to Zoom, you can raise your hand using the raise your hand function. If you're calling by phone, you can press *9 to let us know that you wish to speak. We could put you in a digital line if that's necessary, which I don't know if it will be. There's not a ton of us here tonight. And please state your name before you ask your questions. I'd also ask you to remember to remain muted unless you're called on to speak, and please be respectful of others' thoughts, opinions, and time. And I'm going to be admitting people throughout this. So here you can see our handy raise your hand graphic at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on how you're set up. There's this little raise hand icon when you mouse over it. When you're called on, you can unmute yourself and announce your name. Again, for those just joining us, we also have the chat open, so you can use that to ask questions. And now I'm just going to give a really quick overview of our program. The Present for Art program is an initiative of the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. It was the result of the city's cultural plan, Boston Creates. The program demonstrates the city's and Mayor Walsh's commitment to sustainable funding for the arts by setting aside 1% of the city's annual capital borrowing for the commissioning of permanent public art for capital projects. Beyond integrating public art in city capital projects, the Present for Art program engages other city agencies and municipal partners on best public art practices and demonstrates the lasting value of high quality public art across the city. The program is administered by the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture in collaboration with the Boston Art Commission, the Office of Budget Management, Office of Property Management, and other city departments. I just mentioned the Boston Art Commission. The BAC is the commissioning body for the City of Boston for public art. It's housed in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. The BAC holds contracts with artists, approves artwork on city land, it conserves the City of Boston's collection of art and historical artifacts. The BAC has a curatorial vision that guides the commission when they're reviewing and voting on projects. You may have read it in the call to artists, but it bears repeating. So I'm going to read it to you. The curatorial vision is to commission and approve innovative and transformative artworks that engage communities, enrich and enliven the urban environment, are driven by an artistically strong, vision, enhance the diversity of the existing collection, respond directly to a specific environment, and possess durability appropriate to the lifespan of the work. I'm also going to say that you're here because you saw the call to artists, but it's really important to understand exactly what that is. Aside from being a public request for artists to submit their qualifications for consideration for a commission, a call to artists is a legally binding document, and it serves as the artist guide to the project, both the technical details like schedule, engineering constraints, and important thematic considerations like shared community values, the vision for the site, and the intended users and uses of the site. So with that said, the Adams Street branch of the Boston Public Library. These are the images from the call to artists. I will go through these pretty quickly. I think you should all be familiar, but just wanted to make sure we're all in the right place looking at the same project. This is one of the Rainwater gardens. If you're looking north, this is the Reading Garden, which is one of two sites. And you can see up here in this smaller graphic, the pink areas are the identified potential sites for the public artwork. So let's get started. Who's got a question? Who wants to kick us off? Any brave volunteer?
I can start.
Great.
If I missed the process on how to ask a question, so I'll just
jump in.
You know, our primary question, I think we understand the rest of it, and I might have a follow-up question regarding the conceptual narrative itself, but it's more of a logistic question because we have worked on projects where prevailing wage type ordinances are in place, and oftentimes it takes more time to figure out if it impacts you, if you need to abide by them, and what that means. So we were hoping you'd be able to answer the question. If we're under, I read through the document, we're under 25 employees. Would the prevailing wage ordinance apply to organizations under 25 employees or not?
So I asked our director of admin and finance today your question.
Oh, hi.
And she said, oh, I'm Sarah. She said, yes, prevailing wages would apply. And she said that you have to complete and sign the forms at the contract stages, because you had asked about form LW2. And all of these are included in the call. For everyone else, we've attached all of these documents that are non-negotiable essentially for all city contracts. So she said you would have to complete and sign form L2, but you would not have to report back at each stage of the process.
Okay, cool. It just helps to know if we need to, you know, apply some kind of a contingency for that, because then we scale our project according to that.
Of course.
Cool.
Yeah,
okay.
And I want to also say that I'll include all of this. I'll write up that answer and that question so that everyone else can read through it when we post the written Q&A will be posted on Friday, along with a recording of this question session. So there will be kind of a little bit deeper information if we just confused everyone else. I'm not sure. But it's a good question in terms of all of these documents that go along with our calls. There's a city contract and all those attachments, but then we also have the artist supplement, and that's really sort of the specific artist contract that is somewhat negotiable. So that is something that we would send and ask the artists to look at, and you know, have their attorney look at and send back red line, things like that. So there's a whole set of contract documents that are non-negotiable, but then the artist supplement is really the primary document that we look at for the life of the project in terms of milestones, intellectual property, all of those different things. And I believe that a draft, sort of a boilerplate version of that was included in the call.
This is Bauer Hatcher, Marley Rogers. I guess I would like to know who's responsible for the cost of the footings, and I guess the engineering of the footings, as well as lighting and bringing electrical to the site. Those are my concerns.
That's a really good question, or those are really good questions. And I'm just gonna wrote that down. So the footings really depends on what is being proposed. We try to bring in artists early enough in the phase that there is sort of a cost savings or possible coordination with the construction work that's happening. That it doesn't always happen. And if you're coming in afterwards, you know, after concrete is poured and things are done, then potentially that would be in the artist budget. At this stage, we're early enough, hopefully in construction, that there is opportunity for closer coordination, where there would be cost savings to the artist for footings, for electrical work, for things of that nature. Not every artist is going to be concerned about lighting or electrical, so it's hard for me to give you a yes, no. So a lot does depend on the design. But we'll do our best to get someone on board as quickly as possible to take advantage of the earlier phases of the construction process, for a better integration that is less costly for everyone.
That's fine, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the timeline then? Because that leads right into the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
If I recall, it was everything was going to start in the spring, an announcement, but maybe you could remind me, and then installation projected for next fall. So kind of roughly 6 months of fabrication and installation, or
Yes, we're hoping to have the project installed next August. That's the current construction timeline, which is a relatively
quick
short time frame for a project of this scale. But we did include it in the call so that artists are aware that that's the goal. Ideally, we will have a contract for this executed in November.
Okay.
Which is also a relatively ambitious schedule for us in terms of getting through artist selection and contracting phase, but we'll do everything we can to move that along. It is a somewhat tight timeline.
That's great.
Okay.
It's
for a
fast.
project this size. Yeah.
That's good.
Hi, I'm Lorraine. Having problems with my audio, I somehow lost my Zoom. I have two audios happening. Hear that?
Yes.
I don't know how to communicate. Thing to shut it off.
It's quite an experience right now to hear the echoing. Do you want to try and use the chat and ask a question through there? Okay, great. Because that was, oh, now I've scrolled away. All right, so while Lorraine is typing there, does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? And if not, I can go over some of the other questions that we've received via the form. Going once. All right, so we've been asked several questions via the form that was provided online. One of the more interesting questions that we received was a request to have more information about the oak tree, its story and its location, and asking if they could access the minutes of the first public meeting when attendees spoke about that tree and its importance. And for those of you, this is the tree in question, which is an existing oak. I can't answer that question in depth, but I do know that we have access to all of those different meeting minutes and comment periods that happened throughout the past several years. So our colleagues in facilities hosted several public meetings, as did the architects. And there's a huge amount of information available online, and we can post links to that as part of our Q&A. So Lorraine, I see your question. Hi, I'm wondering if there will be continuous access to water and maybe even the storm water, and can you propose art for all 3 locations? I would say to the second question, yes. We said there are 3 possible exterior locations, and we can go back and look at those again. So 2 in the reading garden and 1 over here in this rain garden, and there is another rain garden up on this side, I believe, but these are the locations that we've identified. There is no limit in terms of if you're only proposing for 1, proposing for all 3. In terms of accessing the stormwater, I don't know. I'm not sure what the exact design of those catchments are. I know that it's going to be planted with wildflowers and other things like that. So I think that's an interesting question. In terms of, you're saying another water access similar to access to electricity. Again, I don't know where the plumbing lines are in the building. They must have, although if it's a rainwater garden, they may not have, what's the word I'm looking for? Sprinkler systems. So that's a good question. I will make a note to try and find out before Friday. And Christina, I see, posted a couple links. The project page on boston.gov is the best place to find links to everything. That's where we'll be posting a link to the Q&A doc. We'll be posting a link to a recording of this session, and it accesses the submittable and any other information as well. All right, I see some new messages. Lorraine, should we consider the installation to be permanent at least 25 years? Our definition of permanent, we call it long-term, and it is 5+ years. That is what we consider long-term public art for capital purposes in the city of Boston. And Gianna asked, it looks like careful consideration of community input has been taken in the library design. Has there been any community input expressed regarding desired public art at the sites? There's an immense amount of information about the community from the community input. We were not very specific. You may recall from the call that we weren't really specific with themes on this one, because the theme is essentially, this is a really popular community library, and it's heavily used. And that's really what came across the most in terms of community input. Again, I'll link to all the documentation that facilities and NADAA have shared online, so that you can all more easily access that and read through the different minutes from community meetings and polls, and they have word clouds. There's quite a bit of information about this branch. Being a new building, there's a lot of excitement in the community for this particular library. I see, you're welcome. I see Lorraine asked, can art be attached to the walls or only in the ground and airspace? There's not, oh, and by the way, this is the interior, which is lovely. Not a lot of opportunities for art, obviously. I don't know about the walls. My gut response to that is that there's not a lot of opportunity there in terms of wall attachments. When you're looking at this reading garden, and we can look through, obviously we identified sort of these spaces, this space here that's closer to the building. And then in the rainwater garden, it's quite compact. So there may be potential here. It's a good question. I think that's something that we would look at the artist proposals, and the artist selection committee would consider that. There's no guidance against it. Let's put it that way for the exterior walls. Yes, I understood that. Sorry. So you're saying in the reading area, are we designated to the grass area? No, I'm going to say no, you're not. We've designated this outside area, these two main exterior spaces that people will be able to access for reading, for all of that. And then we've kind of preserved this main seating area because that was a very strong desire of the community to have this as a reading garden. And they want to preserve this open space. But I don't see, there's no reason as far as the Arts Commission is concerned to limit yourself only to, say, the grass area in this site or over here. I think just looking at the images and seeing what are the opportunities, that's, you know, everyone does such different work. You're all artists. You all have incredibly different mediums and approaches. So we try not to limit those if we can help it. This is actually kind of a helpful plan view to give you a sense of, this is the oak tree, which is pretty dominant in this space in terms of the canopy. And again, it's older. It was initially slated to be removed as part of this new construction, and the community advocated very strongly for it to be preserved.
Can we see that pergola that's shown on the drawing?
Which on the,
Well,
here, yeah, I don't have, so we're standing in that view that I keep going back to, we're sort of standing
right.
underneath it, essentially.
Okay, the other question I have, if you go back another drawing, another one, these, okay, there, what looks like these three concrete sort of bars. I mean, I don't, what are we dealing with there?
So this is the rainwater garden. And when Lorraine asked before about accessing the rainwater, I believe those are related to that catchment system, whatever they're using to collect the rainwater for this area. But I will ask.
Okay, and I mean, I guess even the question might be whether one could attach to them. I mean, I don't know what they are exactly, but, you know, perhaps.
Yeah, and you can see here there's a bench for seating right at the end of that. This is that rainwater garden, so it's sort of in that wedge between the children's section and the adult section, which are these opposite branches here.
Well, maybe they're just seating. You know, I just don't. I couldn't tell what they are.
Yeah, I'll be honest, they look too small to me for seating, but
To me too. Yes.
yeah.
I think it's probably something to do with the catchment, or you know, a modernist element. You know, I don't know. You know.
Right.
I mean, I've seen sculptures like that.
So I'm seeing 2 questions in the chat. Is there a preference towards multiple artworks to cover all 3 areas versus one artwork in one area? No, there is no preference. There is no preference at all. And sort of on a related note, in terms of multiple versus one, we were also asked via the form, will this be divided between more than one artist in multiple locations? It will not. This will be awarded to one artist or artist team. And then Lorraine asks, can people access the rainwater catchment area? Yes, that is my understanding, is that people can access this area, although it is sort of a visual barrier here. I don't know that they're encouraging access, but it is accessible.
Can we look at the largest space?
And that's the reading garden?
Oh, is it the reading garden?
Yeah. That's this space. And I'm sorry, I don't have another view of this.
Is that I mean, these are paved areas?
This is paved, and you can see on the plan here, there's sort of grasses around it, but this is all paved reading. They're calling it the reading garden. Reading garden zone here.
Okay.
And then this is the meeting room, which will have in it some gallery space as well. Lorraine's asking, can we assume that all permits will be secured by the developers or the city? It depends on if permits are required, and there are no developers. This is a city capital project. As long as you're within the construction timeline, we typically aren't requiring separate permits from artists. They're within the construction project, and it's a city capital project. And I believe this is concrete, but don't quote me. As we record, I say that. It's good. I'm going to add that to the list of questions.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we don't need necessarily to know it now, but we need to know what that material is, the paving.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of detail that the artist who's selected will receive a full set of drawings, and we'll have meetings with what we call the working group, which includes all of the partners, the architects. There's public art projects are intensive. And is it, I don't want to mispronounce it, Alenouche?
Yeah,
Ah,
I'm gonna follow some kind of protocol here.
thanks.
Oftentimes, I guess my question has to do with the proposed concept and how much you're willing to deviate from that if, I guess, further knowledge is discovered beyond, the finalist stage. Because oftentimes I just find that, at least our studios, I'm sure many studios are so research heavy to make their works site specific and like really integrated both conceptually and architecturally. But sometimes it changes because new information comes out, or even new desires from you guys, the stakeholder teams. So it's not to say that, what we put into our proposal or what our RFQ package is going to be completely changed or just not important, but how amenable would the city be to changes beyond that point?
Things happen. I mean, when between this narrative proposal where we're looking for what you think you would do at this stage with limited information and limited time. We are not asking for design drawings, and in fact, submitting design drawings will get people disqualified because that's asking artists to spend time, a lot of time, as opposed to writing a narrative proposal, which is part of your statement of interest. We understand that once an artist is commissioned and then actually begins work with the community, with the working group, things in all likelihood will change. The proposal will develop. So the contract is divided out, or the project is divided out into 2 design phases. There's this initial narrative proposal, then the artist is selected by the Boston Art Commission. There's an art selection committee who recommends an artist to the BAC, and then the BAC reviews and approves, ideally, reviews and votes on them. At that point, the artist gets a lot more information. They begin working on preliminary design. They bring that preliminary design to the BAC for review and vote and feedback. And at that stage, there will be potentially community feedback and partner feedback. So we have built into the process anticipation of changes, essentially.
Okay, great.
It's just the reality of it. Once the preliminary design is approved and the artist moves into final design, that's when things get really sewn up, and we don't want to see a lot of changes once you've got all of your engineering, things of that nature. But there's an expectation that as the artist learns more about this building and this community and the end users, that their proposal will develop.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I can see you all out there. Who's got another question? All right, well, I will look at some of the ones we've received as well. So another artist asked for a roof plan to know where the overhangs are. I will look through and see what else we have that's more detailed than these renders and sort of basic plan views. And that we would post as well on Friday. Another artist was asking, I hung them up on the wall, so I'm actually looking at you all and not just down at my desk. The multiple sites we've talked about, splitting the call we talked about. And someone asked how specific we'd like the narrative describing the initial artist concept to be. And so I'll just reiterate what we just talked about again, which is that we don't want to be too overly specific, or it doesn't need to be. If you want it to be, that's certainly acceptable as well. But it doesn't need to be overly specific. You know, they asked just overall themes, or do you need a verbal description of form, material, and color? And you know, honestly, that's a difficult question to ask. I think the overall themes should be included. In terms of form and material and color, it really depends on what the artist or team's individual practice is. And the committee will look at what your experience is. So if an artist is proposing for the very first time a material they've never worked with before, that would definitely make a difference to the committee. And I'm not saying it would be a good or bad difference, but it would be something that they'd want to consider. So if you were planning on a completely new material and to experiment with that, it might be worth mentioning, but it's, you know, you may not know yet. And if people don't know yet, and that's all right too, you know. Lorraine is asking, you mentioned pads, but should we assume to incorporate those into the budget? Do you mean like footings, things like that? Again, it would depend on what you're proposing, and it's a challenging question to answer because I don't know what people would be proposing, but I would say you would want to make some accommodation for that time, right? Because of timing with construction. Yeah, I think you'd want to acknowledge that and think about it in terms of the budget. And I understand that I think the budget template was shared totaling 0 across the board. It should actually total what the commission budget is and not 0, just a little administrative note. I believe the links in the PDF are also for some reason not functioning, so we need to fix that as well. Yeah, did that answer your question, Lorraine? Okay, great. You're welcome. I see Gianna.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. This is really helpful. I was wondering if for the community engagement stage, are there specific community groups that artists should consider working with, or is it the library in general?
It is the library in general, but there is a very active Friends group at this particular branch. So I think that would be a great place to start. There is a school next door as well that I imagine has a relatively, in normal times, has a relatively robust relationship with the library. Yeah, whatever normal times mean at this point. But I think those groups, I know the Friends group has been very active in this process. And we have colleagues who work in the BPL, who work with all the different community groups around all of the different branches, who would be able to help with that as well and connecting. Did that answer your question, Gianna? Okay, great. I know
Thank you.
Those little emojis always make me laugh. Sorry.
Yeah, we're only allowed 2 emotions, but.
It is pretty limited. I don't know why that is with Zoom. It's supposed to be very serious.
I had one other question
Sure.
if no one else is in line. Is seating desired? Especially thinking about the reading garden, I'm imagining that's a place where you're supposed to sit and read.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can see that they've designed in this pretty extensive connected bench system. So yes, they do indeed want seating as the reading garden, but it's relatively present at this point. Is that unchangeable? At this point in construction, it's unlikely that they would want to make major modifications to this, but I wouldn't take anything completely off the table.
Thanks.
I'm not sure that there's a ton of space in the rest of the garden for additional seating. If you see here on the plan view, it's pretty extensive in terms of the amount of real estate the bench is taking up.
Okay, so those are benches and the artwork is anticipated to either
Here
okay, gotcha.
or here along
Okay.
this sort of window wall here.
Okay.
Yeah, this area is off limits, I believe because of the tree.
Okay.
And this tree that they're working to preserve that's quite elderly. Whereas these are all new plantings in this section. So this entire rainwater garden is sort of open for, is a potential site, the entirety of it. Gianna, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And what are the dimensions of that area roughly, or the space?
I just wrote down to provide those. Yeah, no,
Scale.
you're reading my mind because it is a big garden. So let me see if I can get those and post them as well. Okay. Lorraine, I know the PDF, the links were supposed to be live and they are not. So my apologies for that. The website that Christina posted earlier, if you scroll up to the top of the chat, I'll actually just copy and paste it down here in the bottom of the chat again. This site has the links to everything. The Q&A will be linked there. It'll just be a doc file that you can view. This page also links out to the submittable, where everyone has to send all of their documents and portfolio. So this is the project page on our larger website that will keep updating through the life of the project. Christina, is that correct? I'm going to make you talk.
Yeah, that's correct.
Great, thank you. You can also, and I'm going to go to our Let's Stay in Touch page, because you can also sign up, get there eventually. We also have newsletters at boston.gov/arts. There's 2 different newsletters for you all to keep up with. You're welcome, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us. If you want to be updated with future calls, we have several more calls coming out this fall as well. You can follow us at Arts in Boston. There's, again, this direct project link. There's a whole lot of public art projects in the city, and all of them have individual pages. Thank you very much, Christina, for making individual pages for all of our projects, where you can keep up with the progress on each of them. And that's at boston.gov/public-art. And then, of course, there's my email, so you can all email me directly. And Christina is helpfully putting in the links at the in the chat.
Good.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions? I've kind of gone over all of the ones we had submitted in the form. Oh, you're welcome, Lorraine. Sorry about your microphone, and thank you. I'm happy to go back and look at images more. Got about 10 more minutes if anybody wants to see anything specific. Oh, do we know how many finalists will be selected? Typically, we select 3 finalists for interviews. Occasionally, the artist selection committee can't agree and will select 4, but the goal is to select 3 artists or teams for interviews. So the artists, I can describe the process a little bit for those of you who may not be familiar. Everyone will submit, not everyone, but all interested artists will submit their portfolios and other documents through Submittable by next Wednesday at 5 p.m. And then the Artist Selection Committee, which is made up of Boston Art Commission commissioners, local residents, arts professionals from the neighborhood, will independently review all of those submissions on Submittable. And that usually takes, it can take a lot of time depending on how many we get. They will then, based on the ratings that they give everyone's submissions, will narrow the list down to typically 20 or 30 artists who are the highest rated. And then the committee will meet and discuss and review as a group all together. From that, they will select 3 finalists, ideally, although occasionally they have selected 4, and then we'll ask those artists to interview. After the interviews, they will convene and discuss again, and then make a recommendation to the BAC. The BAC will view the portfolios of all the finalists who are interviewed, and then consider the committee's recommendation before they make a decision. So Jin, I hope that answered your question. It's probably more information than you needed, but you know, a lot of people aren't that familiar with our process, and it can be really helpful, I think, to understand it.
Do the finalists receive any remuneration?
They don't. We are not able to offer remuneration to finalists at this time because of our procurement constrictions. So that is why we ask for a narrative proposal, and then it's an interview, but we are not asking for any design work. So the interviews are typically half an hour. They're all virtual at this point. And even in the past, if an artist is not local, they would be able to interview virtually as well. We've always enabled that because we can't pay for travel. And now the playing field is level because everyone is virtual, whether they're local or not.
Do you anticipate either way how, I guess, what the selection criteria might be, how much they're going to weigh past project experience versus the narrative proposal? I guess that's the main question. How do you anticipate the committees weighing those 2 components?
Right, so the criteria is in the call, and the primary criteria is the curatorial vision, which is pretty content rich. But that's the framework by which they view all of the submissions. And I would say they really weigh them typically pretty equally. We ask that people show consideration of the neighborhood, site, and theme, and that's captured in the narrative proposal. We ask that the artist showcase a strong original artistic vision, and that's really captured in the portfolio of past work. And then we ask that they demonstrate experience in public art, which meets the expectations for this commission, and that's captured in the resume. So we have sort of specific questions for each piece, but the curatorial vision is the overarching sort of frame that they're looking at everything through.
Okay, got it.
Oh, thank you, Nomi, for joining us. All right, we can actually go back to just scrolling back. Oh, that's actually a good view of I apologize. This is the view from Adams Street, looking southeast towards the main entrance of the library. And you can see here the reading garden, the pergola, the community room view here. So we're standing approximately here behind the fence. And also that there are some pretty strong sight lines from the street and sidewalk. It's not an enclosed, it's physically enclosed, but not a visually enclosed space. Not that anyone asked about that, but I find it interesting. Yeah, so this is one of the sites here, and then back along this side as well. And the rain garden is on the other side of the building. On Delmont Street, I believe is the name. Anyone have any more questions? I can just keep talking. It's a nice building. Oh, Chin, regarding the aspect of community involvement for the project, is it preferred to involve community to make the project? No, it's not preferred to have community involved to make the project. That's typically not a preference for any of the capital projects that we're funding, these long-term artworks. It certainly may be part of someone's proposal, but generally speaking, we're looking for community engagement in terms of themes, in terms of feedback on the artist design, but that the artist or the artist is fabricating or hiring fabricators to create the work. That said, again, everyone works differently. You're welcome. All right, I'll stop talking. They have a music room too, which is really nice, looking out over this rain garden. In case you guys hadn't noticed, it's going to be a lovely branch.
Hi there.
Yes.
Emily speaking. I think at this point it might be implied, but just assuming that the vegetation, that this area needs to function as a rain garden, but these trees aren't necessarily fixed.
Yes, I would say that's accurate. This is planned as a rain garden, but I would assume that the trees are something that are pretty flexible. The oak tree, again, the oak tree in the other site is not, but in this area, these are new plantings. There's another rendering that shows much more vegetation in this section. So I think the planting plan is going to be somewhat flexible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody have any other questions? Thoughts?
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, it's my pleasure.
It'll be great getting the answers to a lot of those questions, the dimensions of the
Yeah.
areas and such, all of that. We'll look forward to those on Friday.
Absolutely. Yeah, we tend to keep it relatively high level for most of these projects, but especially with this one, because we have detailed such specific areas within that larger garden. I think that will be helpful for everyone to understand the scope of what's been identified.
Sarah, I have a question. This is Tran.
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering if, like, say, artists are allowed to subcontract out, right? So say if I'm applying as an individual artist and I don't have a particular skill set, it would be okay if I subcontract out, or is there a preference that I should be a team?
No, it's absolutely fine to subcontract out. That is completely acceptable to work with fabricators and all kinds of different people with different skill sets. That's really typical for our projects. These are, large scale projects, and it's quite rare that a single artist is able to do every single aspect of it. So yes, subcontractors are absolutely acceptable and even expected for this scale of project.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Can you guys hear the dog? Sorry. He has a question, apparently. All right, well, last call for questions. I'm scrolling down to the end. I'll show you guys the links one more time. Again, there's the direct project link for the Adams Street branch public art project. Follow us at Arts in Boston and access all kinds of information and newsletters at boston.gov/arts. I highly encourage you to do so. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I look forward to seeing your applications. And we'll be posting again on that project page. Oh, you're welcome, Jen. Thank you for your questions. We'll be posting on the project page the answers to some of the questions tonight, this video. Yeah. And then it closes next Wednesday, 5 p.m. Apply early. Get your application in on Monday. Oh, you're welcome, Gianna. Thank you for your questions. All right. Thanks, everybody.